A friend of mine sent me a message uh, in reference to a message that he received from a Jeet Kune Do practitioner as it relates to street fighting versus sport karate or sport martial arts. And the gentleman um, basically put it in proper perspective and said that Jeet Kune Do was for self-defense. It's for street fighting. It's not for sport competition. Never ever was intended for that. Nor did Bruce Lee intend it to be for sport. Bruce Lee created Jeet Kune Do as a fighting method for himself primarily. And it's really interesting over the years to see now, especially many years past after he's gone on, how these people want to compare him to sports martial arts figures back in the day and even presently. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this again, and I've said it before. If you didn't hear it, you're hearing it now for the first time, maybe. And that is simply this. You cannot compare a sport martial arts competitor against a street fighter in the true sense, or a person that studies actual fighting. There is no comparison. Now, let me qualify this. It doesn't mean that a sports martial arts competitor, especially in fighting, it doesn't mean that they don't know how to fight. There are some that are very, very good in fighting that are sports martial arts competitors, and I know many myself. And there are some who are sports martial arts competitors who fight in the sport martial arts arena or karate sport who are not good fighters at all. In the true sense of fighting, they can only spar, point sparring, or point fighting. They can only do that, and they cannot come outside that box. They just don't have the skill or the training. It's really that simple. So I had to say that. There are people who compete in karate, martial arts tournaments that are great at performing, great at timing and point fighting, but it doesn't translate to the street for many of them. And I've seen it too many times. Okay, so now, as that relates to Bruce Lee, there are people, haters, trolls, and what have you, that keep saying Bruce Lee was not a real fighter based on their heroes who are sports martial arts figures. Chuck Norris was not a street fighter per se. I don't know if he could street fight, but he was a world champion. They say 4 or 5 time world champion, middleweight, whatever. That's good. That's great. But don't compare him to the late great Bruce Lee. There is no comparison. And then they want to say, well, how many championships did Bruce Lee win? Some people ask that question. None. He didn't compete because he didn't do sport. It's really that simple, and people are making this more complicated than it really is. Bruce Lee didn't do sport martial arts for that reason. He was not into sport martial arts with trophies and awards, for scoring points and these types of things. Bruce Lee was into learning the art of fighting, martial science. So that was really it on that. And the gentleman in the letter that he sent to my friend was saying the same thing, and same thing that I have been touting for years. Stop comparing sport martial arts to real fighting. And then there's the guys that want to say, well, Bruce Lee doesn't have any fights on record that he won. He didn't beat anybody that qualifies him as a fighter. He was just an actor and so forth. But it's funny, this actor has more world acclaim than any martial artist of any time. He does, and he's still the household word as it relates to martial arts. He's still the poster child. He's still the one we talk about 50 years after he's passed. Nobody else is talked about like that. It's funny, an actor getting all that credit for 50 years. An actor, just an actor. Come on now. We need to wake up and smell the coffee. Bruce Lee was the real deal. And there were many other martial arts masters, grandmasters that were the real deal around that time that he was here too. There were many, not just Bruce Lee, but he was the one who surfaced. He was the one who gained world acclaim. Now, so people can continue to hate on him and continue to say that he wasn't a great martial artist, but the world says different. And you cannot even put anybody beside him during the time that he came up, during that era. And then you have these guys in modern day MMA or mixed martial arts who haven't been in the martial arts that long, who still have milk dripping. You know, they haven't been in martial arts long enough to even understand martial arts. All they looking about is being on the front of a magazine, or maybe an expose, or some scene in a TV show, or in a video or a movie, or opening up a dozen, 2 dozen schools across America, what have you. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. You get in where you fit in, I guess, but doesn't say anything about you as a human being per se. Everyone, for the most part, who has any world acclaim, any popularity in the martial arts today, to include myself, to include all of the masters that I know, to include Grandmaster Victor Moore, to include Bill Superfoot Wallace, to include James Cook, to include I said Chuck Norris, everybody else, they owe that acclaim that they have today to Bruce Lee. And so, oh no, I'm not giving him credit for that. My instructor was so on and so forth. You're not getting the point. What I'm saying to you is this: Bruce Lee made martial arts a household word in the world. It was not going to be that without him. It could have been somebody else, but it just happened to be him. It could have been John Smith. It could have been Frank Johnson. It could have been anybody else. But it just happened to be Bruce Lee in that time that he came up. He's the one who made the divide open. He's the one who opened the way between China or Asia and the West to martial arts. Five Fingers of Death hit the box office with Lole. Right after that, immediately after that came Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee skyrocketed. And everybody wanted to do martial arts after that. Everybody and their mother, grandmother, and their children, whoever, wanted to do martial arts across the world. All because of that one man. It wasn't a black man. It wasn't a white man. It wasn't any other ethnic group. It was an Asian, a Chinese Asian, named Bruce Lee, with some German descent from his mom. That was it. Bruce Lee was the one. I don't have to keep defending this because we already know the answer. He's the reason for me being here in martial arts for 50 plus years now. He's the reason for anybody watching this that's a baby boom around the same time as me. We all jumped on that bandwagon when we first saw Bruce Lee. Everybody wanted to use the nunchakus. We didn't know what those were. That Okinawan weapon, the nunchakus. Bruce Lee made a Japanese or Okinawan weapon popular. Nobody even knew what it was. A Chinese man did that. Or are you saying he doesn't deserve any credit for that as well? He made the eskrima sticks or kali popular. He made the bow staff popular. He made the finger push-ups and the thumb push-ups popular. Those things were not popular before he came along. Not to say no one was doing it, but he made it popular. That was it. Give the man the credit that he's due and that he deserves. We're never going to change it. We're never going to change history. We're not going to change the fact that he made 5 major motion pictures. Enter the Dragon was the highest grossing movie in entertainment during the time that he was here, even though he didn't live to see the outcome. Highest grossing movie, and action movie on top of that, of all time. A Chinese man did that. I'm sorry. That was it. And that was all. But understand this. Sport martial arts is different because of rules and regulations as it relates to real fighting. Sorry. So